are still going to vote for him versus Sarah Palin.
Rosenthal and other gun control groups point out that every year about 30,000 people die because of guns. That's roughly 80 people dying every day. To them, this is a public health crisis that demands action. But that message doesn't seem to be getting much traction in the nation's capital. And meanwhile, at this gun rights rally last month in Virginia, plans were laid out for what critics contend is one of the most aggressive moves against gun control today. 7 states have recently passed laws saying that any guns manufactured and kept within that state would be totally exempt from federal gun law. Depending on the state, that could mean no background checks, no age restrictions, no requirements that sellers be licensed or keep records. It's an audacious strategy to undercut federal authority, and 18 other states are considering similar laws.
Mr. Larry Pratt.
Larry Pratt is helping coordinate this state-by-state strategy. He runs a group called Gun Owners of America.
God forbid we ever get used to the tyranny that we're being saddled with in this country.
By his reading of the Second Amendment, Pratt thinks the federal government has no authority to be involved with firearms at all. No background check, no regulations. He even takes issue with the government keeping guns off of airplanes.
So in other words, you're actually at the point on one part of the spectrum where the federal government keeping concealed handguns off of airplanes makes you uncomfortable. You don't think they should be doing that.
The federal government doesn't do much well. You know, they managed to bankrupt Social Security, they've managed to bankrupt Medicare, they can't run the post office, and they've had over 200 years to try it. And I'm not real impressed with the way they handle airplane security.
I got to tell you, that amazes me. And I suspect it amazes most people watching who would think if there's anything the government ought to be doing about guns, is it keeping hidden weapons off of my flights.
Would it have been a good idea for some passenger to have had a gun on 9/11? Mightn't it have turned out differently?
So you're actually advocating a gunfight at 30,000 feet is an improvement on the situation?
That would have been an improvement to flying into an office building. It's an extension of the same logic that we're somehow better off if we cannot defend ourselves. And it's killed a lot of students and it's killed a lot of people on 9/11. And until we have a major paradigm shift in our thinking, we're going to continue to support policies and laws that say we're better off if we're defenseless.
Don't keep me from keeping a gun. Don't keep me from defending my family. If you don't want to defend yours and you don't want to have a gun, don't. But it's my right, let me exercise it.
Joining me now to discuss gun policy is New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. With New York still coming to terms with the attempted car bombing of Times Square last Saturday, the mayor testified at a Senate hearing this week about guns, arguing against a loophole that allows people on the FBI's terrorist watch list to buy firearms and explosives. The mayor co-founded the group Mayors Against Illegal Guns, a bipartisan coalition of more than 500 mayors from around the country. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for doing that. First, Times Square. What do you think went right in the manhunt, and what went wrong, and what can we learn from it?
What went right was the training that our police, fire, Office of Emergency Management have been doing every day for years showed that it had real value. The public saw something. They did what we asked them to do. They said something. Police took a look. Mounted cops said something's wrong here right away, grabbed the other cops in the area, started clearing people away, called in the fire department, called in reinforcements, and if the bomb had gone off, we at least had protected an awful lot of people. Then the bomb squad went in, defused what was there, did some investigative work. The rest of the detectives came in, looked for evidence, and working with the FBI through the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is the way we always do, and we have great cooperation with the FBI as well as among our agencies, found out who the guy was, and then the feds eventually apprehended him. Shouldn't have gotten on a plane. Fortunately, some customs agent or immigration agent was smart enough to look at the list and say, wait a second, and stop the plane.
Tell us about guns. You are a very prominent advocate for gun control and gun laws. Why is the tide in the country moving against your position?
When I was a Boy Scout, I had a rifle, 22 caliber rifle, Boy Scout riflery merit badge. I have nothing against people carrying guns. I do think that it's a states' right issue, and what's appropriate in one state is not necessarily appropriate in another. I don't think that I should be telling another state what to do. I do think I have a right to tell my state legislators what I think we should do, and what's right in cities may be different than what's right in the suburbs or in urban areas. What is clear is there are federal laws that say you can't sell guns to criminals, you can't sell guns to minors, you can't sell guns to people with psychiatric problems, and yet those laws are not enforced the way they should. And when we grab somebody who's just killed a cop or killed a kid, the bottom line is that most of those guns were bought illegally against federal laws. So I'm not arguing for more federal laws. I'm simply arguing that we enforce those laws and that we close a couple of loopholes. And the most glaring one, which I testified about, is there are gun shows where dealers have to do background checks, but private sellers don't. The trouble is when you go to the gun show, the private seller looks an awful lot like a dealer. They're not one person selling a gun to somebody else. They have this enormous inventory, professional employees that work for them. They're just escaping a loophole in the law that shouldn't exist. And then, given what we saw the other day with this guy getting on a plane, selling guns to somebody who we don't think is safe to the public to put on an airplane with them is just, it's hard to describe how anybody could feel that we should be giving these people guns. There are people that say, well, it's a Second Amendment right to own a gun, not a Second Amendment right to fly, although there are parts of the Constitution you can read that way. Right. But nevertheless, the Supreme Court has clearly said reasonable restrictions are appropriate. You have, for example, the First Amendment, the right to say what you want to say. You don't have a right to stand up in a crowded theater and yell fire as a joke. You have a right to carry guns, but states can have reasonable laws that protect other people in certain situations, and that's what we have in New York. In fact, in New York, we have very tough gun laws, which other states don't have to have, but in our state, murder rate in our city is as low as it's ever been, keeps coming down. We're the safest big city in the country, one of the safest cities of any size in the country, and I think it's a lot because we don't allow guns on the streets in our big city. Out in the suburbs, I think it's very different.
March 3rd, you wrote a letter to the president saying about gun laws, "This is an urgent matter. Further delay will almost certainly result in the needless loss of innocent lives, including many children. Mr. President, the time has come for action." What kind of response did you get, and how would you rate President Obama on this issue?
Well, we always want to give everybody a report card. It's good theater. I think both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue and both sides of the aisle all have not done anywhere near enough. Enforce the laws that are on the books, close the gun show loophole. There's some other things. If you, for example, are a dealer and the federal government takes away your license to sell guns because you've broken the laws, you can then take your entire inventory, go out on the street and sell them, and the laws don't apply to you. It's like saying to a dealer that's selling Coke, to our kids, you're going to go to jail, but first go out in the streets and sell the rest of your narcotics where they can do the most damage.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.